Welcome to Darklight Archives. History isn't just written in ink, it's stained in blood, fear and mystery. Some stories seem too horrifying to be real, but every fact you're about to hear is true and deeply unsettling. From gruesome punishments to deadly mistakes, here are 5 morbid facts from history you won't soon forget. Fact number 1. The exploding corpse of William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England, died in 1087 after suffering internal injuries from a horse riding accident. His body was left unattended for days in the summer heat, leading to severe decomposition. By the time his funeral took place, his corpse had swollen grotesquely. When priests attempted to force his bloated remains into a stone sarcophagus that was too small, his abdomen burst open with an ear-splitting crack, releasing a putrid stench so unbearable that mourners fled the church in horror. The funeral was hurriedly completed, leaving his desecrated remains to rot inside the poorly sealed tomb. It was a humiliating end for a man who had once ruled with an iron fist. Fact number 2. The woman who died twice. Being buried alive was a real and terrifying possibility before the advent of modern medicine. In 1674, Madame Blunden, an Englishwoman, was pronounced dead and placed inside a vault at a school in Basingstoke. But soon after, chilling sounds were heard from inside her tomb, scraping, moaning and frantic banging. The grave was opened, and what they found was horrifying. Madame Blunden had woken up inside her coffin, desperately clawing at the lid until her fingers bled. Her face was contorted in terror, her body twisted in agony. Tragically, by the time they opened the vault, she had suffocated. Some say she may have been in a deep coma rather than dead. But either way, her second death was all too real. Fact number 3. The laughing death that killed hundreds. In the mid-20th century, an eerie and fatal disease spread among the Fore people of Papua New Guinea. It became known as Kuru, or the laughing death. Victims suffered tremors, muscle weakness, slurred speech, and eventually uncontrollable fits of laughter. As their nervous system deteriorated, they lost control of their bodies, becoming unable to stand, eat, or even swallow. Death was inevitable, but not before they suffered months, sometimes years, of agonizing decline. The source of the disease? Cannibalism. The Fore people had a ritual practice of consuming the bodies of their dead relatives, particularly the brains. Unbeknownst to them, they were transmitting prions, infectious proteins that slowly destroyed their nervous systems. When the ritual was banned in the 1950s, Kuru cases declined, but not before it claimed thousands of lives. To this day, Kuru remains one of the most haunting examples of how deadly cultural traditions can become. Fact number 4. The man who was boiled alive by law. In the 16th century, England had some of the most brutal execution methods in history, but one of the most horrifying was death by boiling. And yes, it was completely legal. One of the most infamous cases happened in 1531, when a man named Richard Roos, a cook, was sentenced to be boiled alive after being accused of poisoning a pot of porridge meant for a local bishop. When King Henry VIII heard about the case, he declared that poisoning was such a horrific crime that it deserved a new punishment, being lowered into a vat of boiling liquid and cooked to death. Rose was placed in a massive cauldron of scalding water at Smithfield in front of a horrified public audience. Witnesses described how he was lowered in, then yanked out, screaming, only to be submerged again, repeating the process until he finally succumbed. This method was so terrifying that it was soon abolished. But for a short time in history, England actually had boiling alive as a legal execution method, a punishment as gruesome as it sounds. Fact number 5. The doctor who kept a woman's mummified body for 7 years. Karl Tanzler, a German-born doctor in Florida, became obsessed with a tuberculosis patient named Elena de Hoyos in the 1930s. Despite his efforts, she succumbed to the disease at just 21 years old, but Tanzler's obsession didn't die with her. 2 years later, he crept into her tomb under cover of darkness, removed her corpse and took it home. Using wax, silk, plaster and wires, he preserved her body, stuffing her chest cavity with rags, replacing her decaying skin with wax and silk, and even inserting glass eyes to bring her back to life. He dressed her in fine clothes, applied perfume to mask the stench of decomposition, and even placed her in his bed at night. For 7 years, he lived with her remains, until suspicious locals investigated and authorities discovered his horrifying secret. He was arrested for grave robbing, but shockingly, the charges were dropped because the statute of limitations had expired. Elena was finally reburied, but Tanzler remained fixated on her until his own death. Years later, when his body was found, some reports claimed that a life-size doll of Elena lay beside him, a final disturbing reminder of his obsession. History is full of eerie tales, some tragic, some bizarre, and some that make your skin crawl. Which of these morbid facts disturbed you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoy the darker side of history, be sure to subscribe for more. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.